Hello everyone, today's video is the second in a series of videos looking at kit issued to British troops out in the Far East during the course of the Second World War, the latter years of the Second World War, 1944, 1945 basically. And this is intended for reenactors basically, to give you an idea of what you need and what's available on the market. And what we're actually looking at in the videos is primarily original kit. That's the stuff I have and the stuff I use sparingly. Obviously I do not want to wear this stuff out, but I will give you something of a rundown of what's available on the reproduction market as well if you're looking to recreate this kit. It is a little bit tricky as mentioned in part one, but we'll get into that in some detail in the course of the video. The first thing we're going to look at here on the mannequin is alternative headgear. We talked about the slouch hat, the bush hat previously, the fur felt hat. What we have here is the standard Mark II steel helmet. Now obviously these are relatively easy to find. They can be reproduced if you don't want to use a British one, or if finding it difficult to find a British one. You can use other shells to replicate these, but really there's no reason not to find a British example of the Mark II for using in reenactment. And this is fitted with one example of the helmet nets used out in the Far East. This is an Indian-made large square helmet net, and these are quite iconic. They do turn up in quite a few photographs. You do see helmet nets with smaller gaps in the net as well, much finer nets in use. Generally speaking, you see helmets with helmet nets. That's a fairly simple thing to sort out, is a standard Mark II helmet with a helmet net of some description. And again, you can get repro helmet nets if you can't find an original. But this is my preferred setup for when I'm wearing a Mark II and recreating the kit of a soldier in the Far East at this time, is to use one of these large opening Indian helmet nets. I think they're quite iconic. From that point of view, I like to include that on the helmet. So that's just another example, the Mark II with helmet net, which for troops in 14th Army, very common to see, and you do sometimes see them mixed and matched with the hats. So there's a little bit of scope there. Again, if you're looking to recreate a specific unit, rather than trying to produce something generic, look at photographs of that specific unit if you can find them, and try and replicate what they were doing in the kit they were wearing at the time. The next thing to talk about is an alternative to the Angola shirt, which we looked at in part one, which, as I said in that video, was probably the most common form of upper garment you'll see. Certainly in photographs it's extremely common, and it was very popular. The trousers that I showed with that were from the Indian-made JG battle dress suit, and we have the blouse from that suit here. Now these weren't popular, and as I say, were often replaced with the shirt where possible. It is a battle dress blouse in form. As you can see, it blouses up here over the waistband, which has a buckle. It is literally a battle dress pattern made in cellular material in this JG colour. These were made in khaki as well. The battle dress was introduced with the intention it would be worn blouse and trousers together as a suit. But as I say, the blouse was not particularly popular, but it is another option. And you do see these more with slightly more rear echelon troops. So as I say, this is another option. This is an original, uses coconut shell buttons. So you have the pleated pockets here, the waistband. There is a reproduction of this that What Price Glory produce. It's too long in the body, so it requires some alteration to get this correct high-waisted look. And also they tend to be made for people with more generous waists, should we say, than those typical of a British Second World War soldier. So a little bit of retailoring there is in order to make those look a bit better. The material and so forth isn't perfect, but they can be altered to look a lot better than they are when they first arrive. I believe Rob at British Muzzle Loaders has done quite a good job of modifying one of these, altering it so it looks somewhat more akin to the originals as we have here. As I say, you could improve it further by adding coconut shell buttons. These are still produced out of the Far East, and you can actually buy them on eBay. They're just very, very, very slightly smaller than the originals, but a nice detail to add if you can. We'll turn this around now and have a look at some of the other details of this, just to show you the details of what exactly you're looking for and what you're trying to reproduce. So you obviously have the button closure down the front here, and you can see that blouse is over with the waistband at the bottom here. There is a collar button and obviously a second button down here, but they tend to be worn open at least to there for ventilation purposes, of course. The two pockets on the chest have obviously a squared off pocket flap and a double pleat on each, as you can see there. We'll turn this around now and have a look at some of the other details. You can see there are epaulets up on the shoulder here. See that there again with one of these coconut shell buttons. And being battle dress, the sleeves are shaped with that forward curve, which is obviously intended that if you're lying prone and bringing the rifle up to the shoulder, the sleeves of the blouse are actually shaped to aid you in doing so. So that's another feature carried across from the serge battle dress design, is this shape to the sleeves, that curve forward in the arm there, as you can see. The cuffs close with a single button there, as you can see. There's no gusset or anything, obviously, to allow these to be easily rolled up, and they often were. And at the rear here, you can see we do have a yoke across the shoulders there, otherwise very plain back, and you have all the pleats worked in at the waist here where it's gathered into the waistband. And there are two buttons here where this would button onto the trousers. Typical for battle dress, the trousers and the blouse button together. You can see that at the rear there. The second alternative to the Angola shirt we're going to look at in this video is this, the Cellular bush jacket. These seem to turn up in photographs in numbers much later in the war, but this is nevertheless an alternative to the shirt if you're looking to recreate that sort of time period, the kit from that time period. These were very popular both during the latter years of the war and also post-war. They were used extensively by men serving out in Malaya, in the Malayan emergency, and were very popular by all accounts. So the design is a good one. It's again the same cellular material, basically Airtex to use the brand name. The same material that the blouse was made from, but it's a lot more practical design. One of the reasons the blouse was unpopular was it tended to ride up. It's a lightweight garment and it tended to ruck up, particularly with equipment being worn, and expose the midriff, which was not a good thing, and it tended to rub and chafe, or allow rubbing and chafing to take place. This obviously is a much longer garment and it can be worn out. They were sometimes tucked in, but it can be worn out of the trousers, gives better ventilation from that point of view. It differs visually from the blouse even when worn sort of tucked in that it doesn't have pleats on the pockets. So if you're seeing one of these worn tucked in, the thing to look for is the pleats on the pockets, and you can definitely tell them that it isn't the battle dress blouse. You can see it closes down the front again with the coconut shell buttons here. You have a very large, wide collar on it. Two chest pockets, again squared off pocket flaps but no pleats, and then you have lower pockets in the skirts here with an unbuttoned flap over the top, and they're quite a decent size. No one that I'm aware of makes a decent reproduction of this. I believe What Price Glory make a reproduction of what they refer to as the British pattern, which is sort of similar to this. You could perhaps retailor it, but it's a shame no one reproduces this. It would be an excellent thing to reproduce. It would be a useful thing to reproduce if you could get the cloth right and the colour right. It would be a very useful thing for reenactors, certainly, to have access to these both for wartime, recreating wartime kit, and also post-war kit, Malayan emergency era kit as well. So, as I say, this is something to look out for. Perhaps try and find an original. They do turn up in relatively decent sizes on occasion, so keep an eye out for these. Again, it depends whether you want to wear original or what kind of reenacting you're doing. The kind of reenacting we're doing, we don't do a huge amount of particularly active stuff. Wear things sparingly, launder them carefully afterwards and so forth. That's the aim of the game. This one is a little bit damaged. The collar is quite heavily worn and so forth. So I do have a nice example in the collection, and this is sort of my wearing one. The sleeves are a little short for me, but again, the sleeves were commonly worn, rolled up. Speaking of the sleeves, we'll start turning this around now and show you some of the other details so you know what you're looking for if you're looking to try and find one of these or indeed reproduce it. Looking at the sleeves here, these open much wider than those on the battle dress. You can see you have two buttons, one on the cuff here and then one further up. Again, no gusset. So these can be opened right up to here and then rolled up. It's obviously a common thing to see in the Far East at the time. So slight improvement on the battle dress design there as well with the design of the cuffs. Looking at the rear here, you can see the yoke over the shoulders there. You have pleats worked in here and here, and then you can see this is actually drawn in at the waist, as you can see there. So it's more voluminous in the skirts and over the shoulders, and then neatly nipped in over the waist, so it's not just a square garment hanging down. And turning this right round, one last thing to mention, if I lift the sleeve out of the way here, you can see you have a loop there to allow a belt to be worn with this. So you find that we're issued with belts that used a battle dress type buckle to slot through these. Obviously when not being worn with equipment, you could wear this with that belt around the waist to give that little bit of smartness. Not that it's a particularly smart garment, but it adds a little bit of smartness to it. And there's one of these on each side, just down the side seam there at waist level, as you can see. So there we are. I hope you found it interesting looking at this. Just some alternatives to what we looked at in part 1. Obviously part 3 we'll be looking at kit and so forth, and that will be coming out in the not too distant future. I can't give an exact timetable, but as I said, between part 1 and part 2, in the not too distant future, I'll be making that video and releasing that as well. As I say, I do hope you found it interesting looking at this. If you have and you'd like to see more from the channel, please do consider subscribing if you haven't already. And whether you're newly subscribing or you've previously subscribed, please do make sure you hit the little bell, the notification button down below. That will of course alert you when I upload future videos. If you really like my uploads and you would like to support the channel, you can. Both Patreon and PayPal are linked down below. And as ever, a huge thank you to everybody who supports the channel using those two methods. It's greatly appreciated, as I always say. Thank you all very much indeed. If you'd like to follow the channel on social media, you can. Facebook, Instagram and Twitter are all linked down below. And if you'd like to get in touch but you don't really use social media, there is of course an email address down there in the description as well. That's everything for this video, so until next time, bye for now.